In New York City, we have between 100 and 200,000 undocumented people here almost overnight. Where are they going to put them? So they had to choose Floyd Bennett Field in a sense. So here's one specific example. Schools were canceled for 8 hours, right? The next day they went remote. They had to do some extra cleaning for the 1,500 who are sleeping there. Besides that though, how has it really impacted the community?
To be honest with you, when we really think about it, it's not until it's in your own backyard, then you're like, oh my God, it's the real thing. The community is really upset over this because you see it everywhere. You go to the mall, they're there.
And there's the aggressive panhandling
correct.
Or something.
So very aggressive. And this was a once pristine kept area. So I can only speak as to what it's doing to my district specifically, but if there's no real solution, it's just not going to end.
Hello and welcome to New York Insider. I'm Liam O'Neill. Today I sit down with New York State Assemblymember Jamie Williams to talk about migrants in her district. Ms. Jamie Williams, welcome to New York Insider.
Thank you for having me.
You are the assembly person for District 59,
yes.
Which is Lower Brooklyn, the Rockaways?
It's the southeast part of Brooklyn.
Okay. And we have you here today because in your district there is the Floyd Bennett Field migrant camp. And very notably, your name, I was just reading it, is at the top of a lawsuit against the governor's office and Mayor Adams' office over this migrant camp. What brought us to this point? Describe the migrant camp if you can and why you filed this lawsuit, along with many others.
Of course, and the intent wasn't to go that route. At the very beginning, there were rumors about this tent coming to Floyd Bennett Field and so forth. And then the rumors were like, no, that's not going to happen. And then all of a sudden, the last week in August of last year, well, it was really going to happen. And we had reached out to the governor and so forth. And that was before stake was in the ground. And we said to the governor's team and the mayor's team, hey, Floyd Bennett Field is not an area where you put individuals to live. It's not a place suitable, right? Because number one, there's no infrastructure there. There is no jobs there. The supermarket is probably almost 2 miles away. Where they decide to put the tent, it's like almost a 10 to 15 minute walk from there to public transportation. It's a good walk. And then you have nature's best, rainfall, snowfall, wind. So when it rains, it floods. And it's a flood zone. So they chose...
It's just inches off the bay.
Correct.
Off Jamaica Bay.
But, it's a little bit off the bay. But there are low areas in Floyd Bennett Field, and they chose an area, runway 19, that was a little more elevated. However, it will still have ponding, sometimes, depending on how heavy the rain is, 8 to 9 inches of water.
Oh my goodness.
So we started really paying attention, and there was a lot of rain that happened, and we actually had someone that came out there and used their little surfboard and was actually being pulled by, a pickup, and it was like really they were surfing.
That's significant rainfall.
So we did that, and everything that we brought to them, they decided to go ahead with the plan to put these migrants there in this very unsafe, unpredictable area. Okay,
so the stakes were driven into the ground. When? August
So
2023?
Conversations. This started happening, I believe, at the ending of September
2023.
Correct.
Okay.
Or even in October. I mean, they were scoping out the area and so forth.
So you put out this message, was ignored. They went through with it anyway. And then what happens?
So then
months that follow.
so then what happens? We're looking for support from colleagues, and we reached out to. It was a bipartisan group of us that came together, and Congresswoman Nicole Malliotakis came with the chair of natural resources and the chair of the subcommittee on investigation to Floyd Bennett Field.
These are federal
Yes.
positions?
And on that day, it rained and there was very heavy fog. And they realized themselves that this was not the place you put people.
How many people are there at that point?
There were none.
Okay.
There were none. And at that point, we decided to head to DC to testify before Congress as to why Floyd Bennett Field should not be used. First of all, Floyd Bennett Field, it's a national park. There are guidelines if you're using the national park and so forth. And it wasn't made for housing or temporary housing. So we decided to move forward, and we did everything that we could have, and even calling on the Biden administration. If it's a national crisis, call it a national crisis. Up to this date, haven't been called a national crisis.
You mean the migrants
Correct.
crossing the border?
Right, the migrant issue. And I guess like some people would say, well, so why now? This has been happening. But to be honest with you, when we really think about it, it's not until it's in your own backyard, then you're like, oh my God, it's the real thing. So our community, our constituents were really, really, they were very upset about it.
And this is even before people are coming?
Correct. We did multiple rallies, multiple press conferences, everything that we could have done, we did. And they still went ahead and did all of that. And, they're still there. Even not too long ago, they had to evacuate the individuals from there. I was in Albany during the State of the State, the governor.
This was in January, I believe?
Yes.
With 60-mile-an-hour winds?
Correct.
Very cold. Tents are at that point, I think I saw images crashing down.
Well, it wasn't
Children
crashing,
crying or...
Yes, people were panicking. Nuts and bolts were falling from the ceiling and so forth. And out of all the schools, because we do have an evacuation route, because for the people that live in the Rockaway Peninsula, to travel down Flatbush and go to higher grounds. So the decision was made to put these migrants into James Madison High School.
And how many migrants are we talking?
At that point?
Probably like 1,500.
Okay.
So that was the school that they chose.
So the Floyd Bennett Field at that point, during these high winds, completely evacuated of somewhere in the ballpark 1,500 migrants, and they go to James Madison High School.
Right. So James Madison High School is also the school that my daughter goes to. So I left from Albany and traveled straight to James Madison that night. And, I know the principal personally. I wanted to lend my support to her. And, some parents felt as it was a good gesture that the school was doing that. And that's fine. But a lot of other parents were very upset that the school had to shut down, even if it was just for the night. But then some of the images, like people were just sleeping on the floor. The next day the school went remote. So it was a lot of moving parts. I hope that this never happens again. But who knows?
Great.
And I think there was a story about they could have chosen another site for
Yeah, I mean,
evacuation route.
probably they could have used Brooklyn College, much more suitable area. I'm sure OEM has an evacuation plan in place, and I don't think James Madison is under that particular.
Because the community college was vacant, is that what I understand?
I believe so. It was.
So that was perhaps a poor decision in the rush of the moment, the panic of the
Right.
moment.
Well, at least, now, as a parent, I feel as though that was not a good decision. You're putting one population over the other. So people were very concerned about that. And how much can you do to a community when there wasn't any um, transparency or better communication? So,
So here's one specific example. Schools were canceled for 8 hours, right? The next day they went remote. They had to do some extra cleaning for the 1,500 who were sleeping there. Besides that, though, how has it really impacted the community? I mean, the migrants, the camp is not necessarily a good living place with 8-9 inches of water, gusty winds, no nearby structure, services. But how has it impacted the community at large, all these people living there?
well, again, so when you have nothing to do and there's no infrastructure, no jobs in place, um, you know, even on this rainy day, um, people are walking the district, door knocking, begging for money, begging for food, for clothing, and we've reached out to the administrators at Floyd Bennett Field, and they did say we have all of these amenities here, and some people will choose to do what they want to do, and the community is really upset over this because you see it everywhere. You go to the mall, you know, they're there.
And there's the aggressive panhandling or
Correct.
something.
So very aggressive, and it's concerning because there was even like reports of shoplifting, so forth. Like I was 7-Eleven, they had to put someone at the door to kind of like regulate who comes in, who doesn't, and so forth. So there are a lot of different issues that is occurring where that is concerned. Um, is there transparency as to reports? Not really. I mean, we have put in a FOIL for NYPD to see how many calls they've gotten, how many incidents have happened. And they said, well, they will get back to us sometime in May. So
Isn't there a time limit for
correct,
FOIA?
correct. But everything takes some time, and as we see, it.
What's the most, there have to be some harrowing stories. I've talked with other people in the district who have their own harrowing stories about a real decline in way of life.
Well, of course. I mean, so for instance, like if people accustomed to walking their dogs, jogging and so forth, people are concerned because you don't know who is who, what is happening. Even today, we can see in the city what have happened in the last few weeks, from the assault in our NYPD offices to the 15-year-old, all migrants. And we're not saying that we didn't have crime before, right? But if there is a population that is there that have no respect for our law enforcement, who is here to protect and serve, that's a problem, right? We have to do better. We have to vet these people and do what we need to do because you're putting other people's lives on the line. And the quality of life, what is it?
None.
So people are very upset about what is happening because at the end of the day, it's not a national crisis, and it's an open,
Because it's in your own backyard.
right, and it's if nothing is done at the border, right? How is it going to stop if we don't have enforced or secure borders? They're going to keep coming. And when they keep coming, they're making their way up north to New York City. And quite frankly, just this week, I was really happy to hear that the mayor, was thinking of looking at this right to shelter law. And I commend him for doing that because that might be the only thing to save New York City. And I understand that there are others that don't agree with him, but I feel as though he would need all the support that is needed to address this problem. Because it doesn't matter how much money you throw at an issue, especially this, if we don't have a real solution, it's not going to end.
And you need multiple solutions, right? I mean, the federal border is not really in your purview, but what happens at the state and city level somewhat is.
Yes.
So put yourself in Mayor Adams' shoes or Kathleen Hochul's shoes. Both of these individuals inherited at the state level a sanctuary state. Mayor Adams at the city level, right to shelter. They inherited this. And this migrant crisis in the last calendar or 2 years has just exploded. What are they to do? They need, in New York City, we have between 100 and 200,000 undocumented people here almost overnight. Where are they going to put them? So they had to choose Floyd Bennett Field in a sense, or what? Do you know of any other alternatives they could have
Well,
done?
first of all, I think one would say that when the migrants started coming here, and the issue was probably on a smaller scale, they didn't expect it to grow into such, where it started getting out of hand, right? They did not expect that. It was something that grew so big and started to spiral down really fast. And I think I would have appreciated if it was a three-way conversation, where both the governor and the mayor and myself and the other representatives came together if you were choosing certain areas. And my district is no different from Staten Island, where they fought as well for their rights, and the folks that are in Queens, where Creekmore is concerned, right? It's our community. At the end of the day, I also represent, the people that live there. So with not having that dialogue, you put me in a really compromising position because I have to answer directly. I'm the one there that's, listening to them, going to the meetings, having that daily interaction with my constituents. So I felt as though like that should have been different. Would it have had a different outcome? Probably not. However, when the governor chose to fit the bill for Floyd Bennett Field, and also understanding we had just left the budget season where, people have concerns, cuts to certain things, you want the best outcome to then find this pot of money to put these individuals at Floyd Bennett Field. And I get it. The migrants are not just only in my district, as I said, but you take one of the most residential areas in Brooklyn, the 15th Assembly District, it's like the suburban district of the city. It's like the small town from upstate stuck in Brooklyn. It's that residential. We don't have any trains running through our district. It's 2 and 3 family homes, very tight-knit community, lots of green spaces. People do a lot of stuff outdoors. So to bring this fracture into the community, people had no choice but to be up in arms. And could we have said, you know what? Yes, she could open up the rest of the state. Who am I to say, you know what? Put them in somebody else's district. This needed to be a better communication within everyone to really find that better solution. Because there are places upstate that may be low density or very low population and so forth. But again, that needs to be a conversation with other electeds at the table, right?
Certainly no easy solutions.
Correct.
I mean, because I've read reports upstate, there's acres and acres, millions of acres of land, not necessarily a whole lot of abandoned buildings that could be converted. That's going to take millions of dollars, billions of dollars. There's no infrastructure. There's certainly no jobs. That doesn't happen overnight, right? You can't just put a camp in the middle of
right,
and
that's for upstate. So then you took
that's
that,
upstate,
right.
Exactly.
And then you took that same model and put it into Floyd Bennett Field, where there is nothing there, absolutely nothing.
But infinitely more than what's in the middle of the Catskill Mountains.
Correct.
Right, and still you couldn't handle it.
Right.
That's what you're saying.
So,
So, I want to go back to the residents. They're upset. Obviously, you've mentioned this quality of life has been very impactful.
of course.
The decline of quality of life. You mentioned moments ago, though, the cost, or you started talking about the cost. What are residents up in arms about the cost associated with this?
Of course. I mean, you're talking about a residential community where so many people have to pay their own property taxes, their mortgage. We have people that are renting, and that doesn't mean that they're not struggling. So once is you're taking and this, pot of money and paying for a place where it's not sustainable, and then you're also taking from our law enforcement to put officers there. It's a lot that is going on.
It's a drain on law enforcement, drain on healthcare.
It's also, even in that particular area, there is no working fire hydrants there. Like FDNY is supposed to be on there all the time, but are they? Not really. And then the buses, they have the MTA buses. So it's really taking away from other agencies to be able to accommodate the facility there.
I believe it was the Comptroller's Office that estimated $11 to $12 billion over the next 3 years. The costs for the city overall, the migrant costs. But that doesn't include a whole lot of hidden costs as well.
Correct. And that's just probably a projected cost. But think about it. That's the cost that we're dealing with today because of the amount of people that we have. But if they keep coming in, right now we're still in the winter, it's going to be spring soon. So probably there is less people coming in right now because of the weather and so forth. But as soon as the weather breaks, who knows how much more is going to be coming? And that amount is going to be a more projected, higher amount. If we were to not do anything and just try to be able to keep everyone here in the city.
Back up a decade or so, and a lot of people in New York City, New York State, gave rise to what now we call the sanctuary state and the right to shelter. Actually, the right to shelter is longer than a decade. But a lot of people were on board with these policies at the state and city levels. We're a state that welcomes immigrants, right? We're a city that's built upon immigrants. Obviously, our country is built upon immigrants. You're an immigrant. My father was an immigrant. It's a great sentiment to talk about. It's a great goal to shoot for, welcoming all people, and it sounds great. Having a sanctuary city, you can a right to shelter. Do you think there's a change in heart right now with this crisis?
Well, it has to have a change of heart in the sense of, first of all, the right to shelter. I don't think that it was meant for what is happening now, right? We have a lot of homeless people on our street. We have people who have served our country and that they are homeless. What are we doing to help them? So we have this right to shelter law in place, and it's being abused. It is being abused. And we are in a situation that there is no end in sight.
There are no solutions on the table at this point.
At this point. And let us not forget, before this crisis came about, we also have an existing population that is also undocumented, who've been here for quite a long period of time.
Within the city, I think
the city,
I read a figure, 800,000 people.
Could be. Working, paying their taxes, not looking for a handout, and working really hard. Wouldn't they want their working papers too? Wouldn't they want some road to where they can have legal status? So if someone was in that predicament, if we were in that predicament, and then you have someone who's coming across the border, and you see that it's like they're jumping the line, right? It really sends a message, or it can anger that other group because, hey, probably that individual should go back to the border and then come back again, right, to get some of these services. So we have two different things happening, and it has to. There is no quick solution.
Okay.
Because this is on a federal level, right? We're talking about Department of Homeland Security. It's a whole process. And who is the state to get into the process where they're making their own laws? Like, for instance, if you're going through the process to obtain your green card, it's a lot that goes into that. It's a lot of money that's spent to get that green card. Then from that, if you decide, within that span, to go to become a citizen, that's another process. And you're like on probation within that time. And then, the application is not cheap. It has become very costly. And then you have to study. You take the oath. So for people who've went through that process, and it has been, whether it was a costly one, a very stressful one, they know what it took for them to become that citizen. And when you have a group where, okay, well, we need to have them working, or we need to give them authorization to work, I just hope that we don't forget the existing people who've been actually given back to our country that would like the same opportunity, but doesn't have that opportunity.
That jumping the line.
Jumping the line.
People,
Probably,
maybe not the nicest way to say it, but
that's what it seems. I mean, you ask anyone, right-thinking individual, and would all these migrants be entitled to asylum? Most likely not. It's not just Venezuelans that are coming through the border. There are people from many other countries. It's just the opportunity to be here. But at the same time, I understand that, but we also have to have a process. If you do break the law and you assault anyone, that has to be taken into serious consideration. And if you can do that without even getting any legal status in this country or in this state, what would you do about it?
I want to talk about the politics of this for a moment, not necessarily at the federal level, because that's beyond your purview, but at the state and city level. I asked you, is there a change in heart in these policies? First of all, is there a change in heart over right to shelter, sanctuary state at your constituency level? And is there a change in heart at the leadership level that you see?
Well, on the constituent level, I would tell you that with what's happening, they feel as though those laws need to be revised. How much more can we take? That's a real concern from our constituents. On the elected level, I cannot speak for any other elected but myself. But I support what the mayor is saying, that it needs to be revised, because every district is different. Every individual, do things or have a different belief. And I respect that. If you want the migrants in your community, God bless you, that's fine. But when you represent an area where, people are very concerned and it's not right what they did to us in the southeast part of Brooklyn, there's no other way.
So the mayor has voiced opinion that this needs to be changed, but he's in a tough spot too, because there is, what have people called it, the nonprofit industrial complex that is just ready to sue his administration over changing the policy.
That is so true. So it's not an easy thing to deal with because, again, you're trying to fix something else, and they're like, well, there's nothing wrong with the right to shelter law. Don't touch it. Like, but what are we doing? How are we sustaining? So, for instance, like in Floyd Bennett Field, there are signs all over that says no walking on the grass, no parking, so forth. And there was one night where I'm actually there almost every day when I'm in the district, right? And there were cars parked without license plate, without registration. And we were able to get those vehicles towed. And with doing so, these vehicles had to belong to the migrants. So you just got there and you're able to have access to cars, to trucks, to minivans.
Mopeds.
In Roosevelt, outside of Roosevelt Hotel, that's what you see,
Right.
hundreds of these mopeds.
So where did you get this? No answer. And then when the police was there to be, disrespectful and aggressive at the same time, it's just insane. So those vehicles were towed. And what we heard is that, again, go back to the NGOs or whoever, there are groups that is facilitating these type of things, right? Just like there are groups that is coming in on a daily basis at Floyd Bennett Field, handing out clothing, different things. But then whatever they don't use is then left there. The wind blows, and their clothing throughout the grounds, just garbage. And this was a once pristine kept area. So I can only speak as to what it's doing to my district specifically. But if there's no real solution, it's just not going to end.
Okay.
And the NGOs, it's putting, I would say, the mayor in a very tough place because he understands what it's doing to our city. And he can't do it by himself unless he has the support of city council and so forth. And again, different electeds have different passions.
Some city council people have been very vocal up till this day about bringing the migrants into my district. We shouldn't stop this right to shelter. And in fact, I think they overturned a initial court ruling to allow voting for any resident, any human being within the district, regardless of their legal status. There are a lot of people who want people to be given the right to vote. I believe last week it was overturned.
Yes.
But it's not dead, because there are people who are still of this opinion.
Well, for me personally, and the people that I represent, it's really insane that you can give that right to someone who've just come to this country, spend 30 days to have that ability to do that. We go back to the process of getting a green card or your citizenship, taking that oath, and you're telling me that you want to give someone that ability to make a decision to vote, who has not contributed to our city, to our country. That is unfair to the people that live here in New York City.
Well, that is a bold statement, I think, and really coming from your heart there to wrap up this half-hour interview. It's been great to have you on. this issue is not going away. I think there'll be probably more things to talk about at a future
Yes,
episode.
and at this point, again, we have to, I feel as though we're at a point where you can't hide or, you know what, yes, we know what's happening is wrong. No, we need to understand that this is a spiraling crisis that has no end. And there's already a housing crisis that was already existing. We're just adding more layers of issues onto what was already existing. So we need to come up with better solutions. And if the mayor feel as though these laws need to be revised, we need to come to the table to do just that and not see it, as a way of getting individuals to vote. Because I will not like that to be happening for my constituency, to be at the hands of non-citizens, to be voting and making decisions on their behalf.
I'm going to say one last thing, I think. I started this interview by saying your name is at the top in a very bold place on this lawsuit trying to close down Floyd Bennett Field migrant camp. I think you've proven yourself as willing to take a stand and fight on behalf of your constituents and fight for common sense.
Yes, and it's a bipartisan fight. It's not just me, but also Councilmember Joanne, who's been instrumental in this, and many others, because we believe in our community, we believe in our values, and you don't make decisions and put it in people's backyard without having that conversation. We are citizens. We pay our taxes and we do what is right. And it's unfair that you take something to this magnitude, a national crisis or a national issue, and put it in our backyard. Unacceptable.
Assemblymember Williams, thanks so much for being on New York Insider. It's been a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you for having me.